Monsieur le Président de la
Mr. President of the General Assembly, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, delegates. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, allow me at the outset to address Mr. Korosi, Director of Environmental Sustainability in the Office of the President of Hungary. Mr. President, your election to the presidency of the 77th General Assembly of the United Nations is a clear message about the roadmap established by this annual meeting of nations. Mr. President, please accept my warmest congratulations. Secretary General, I convey to you my deep gratitude for your continued commitment and your devotion in your leadership of the United Nations organization. On behalf of the Malagasy people, I also wish to take the opportunity offered to me by this illustrious rostrum to reiterate our deepest condolences to the British people. Queen Elizabeth II inspired many generations in her country and throughout the world. I also wish to convey my congratulations and our wish for a reign full of health and blessings to His Majesty King Charles III. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the annual meeting of the United Nations at the General Assembly is always an opportunity to raise the banner of our aspirations, namely the aspiration which brings us all together here, that is universal peace. Now that we've learned to live with COVID-19, that we have discussed at length over the last 2 years, we are, in spite of everything, facing the consequences of this crisis. This crisis has proven to us that it is in the most difficult times that we realize the importance of solidarity between nations. The theme of this session, Transformative Solutions to Interlocking Challenges, becomes entirely logical. In this context, it gives us new hope, reassures us, and gives us new prospects for advancing together along the path of development. When we were forced to face the health crisis, we chose to place our trust in our scientists and in the natural riches of our land. The creation of the pharmaceutical plant in Madagascar, Malagasy, when the crisis was in full swing, demonstrated that we could turn difficulties into opportunities in order to exploit our biodiversity and in so doing protect our people. Despite the fact that we predicted the apocalypse in Africa, the infection rate and death rate in Madagascar is among the lowest in the world. We were classified as a green zone. In other words, we were among the countries with the lowest infection rate, and as such, entering Madagascar requires neither a PCR test or a health certificate. We have flown in the face of all statistics, and we have emerged from this crisis stronger than ever, and particularly more committed than ever to ensuring that our country emerges and flourishes. Ladies and gentlemen, the world was just getting back on its feet from the pandemic when new crises emerged. No country has been spared by the consequences of COVID-19, and the conflict in Ukraine has sowed further instability and heightened inequalities. This is yet another major obstacle to our efforts to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. Like all countries in the world, we are feeling the full force of the inflation caused by this crisis. We are convinced that all wars end around a table. Dialogue is the only way to bring about peace. As such, Madagascar reiterates its appeal for dialogue to resolve the conflict, because its consequences are global. They're growing more burdensome day by day, and developing nations such as our own are those that pay the highest consequences of this crisis. The crucial role of the United Nations must be to encourage multilateralism in order to find equitable solutions which take account of the strengths and weaknesses of each country and its people. How can we accept the fact that in this period of crisis, certain countries with more than $100,000 GDP per capita and others with less than 600 GDP per capita buy barrels of oil on the same market and at the same price? Our organization can take measures to support low-income countries so that they can benefit from and supply themselves with oil at equitable prices, because the current global situation is a source of major upheaval in many countries. Certain states have seen themselves affected by instability. Social fabrics are unraveling and economies are growing more fragile. Indeed, certain countries have been forced to increase fuel prices by 50%, and in some countries that has produced riots and socioeconomic turbulence. Recovery is a shared concern. Our solidarity is the only way that we will be able to heal our societies, ensure that our economies recover, support growth, and establish peace. Ladies and gentlemen, dear leaders, as things stand, all countries have been forced to review their development strategies, and in so doing, they've been convinced of the need to speed up the industrialization and the process of ensuring the self-sufficiency of all countries. We are convinced that we must produce and locally process everything our population needs. There are weapons more powerful than bombs, tanks, and missiles. These are our lands, our raw materials, our natural resources, and our people. Local industrialization, agricultural innovation, and the leadership of leaders are our ammunition to build our strength and to strengthen our shield so that we can protect our people. In Madagascar, our strategy has involved developing a plan to make up our development delays. We have established the plan Emergence Madagascar, and I began implementing that plan when I entered into office in 2019. Our vision is clear and has gone hand in hand with political will that we demonstrate through everything that we do. A sector-by-sector and project-based approach has been prioritized in order to raise Madagascar to the rank of newly emerging country. We've launched an ambitious program of reforms to modernize our administration, strengthen human capital, and foster strong, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth whose driving force is development. Madagascar is a blessed country because we have water resources for hydroelectric. We have a number of sunshine hours per year. That means that we can open solar power stations, and we have wind power for wind farms. As things stand, many countries are facing energy problems. Consequently, we need to step up the pace of renewable energy production to achieve energy self-sufficiency in the next 5 years. We intend to double, even triple, our energy production capacity. Counterparts, brothers. Now is 2022, and it's unfortunate to note that Africa remains the continent in which the majority of families live in darkness and obscurity. More than 600 million African people, 85% of which are Madagascan households, continue to use candles and oil lamps to light their homes. Consequently, we are launching one of the largest operations ever seen to equip Madagascan homes with solar kits by the end of next year. A number of these, of course, will be subsidized by the state. Once this goal has been achieved, Madagascar intends to become perhaps the first, or at least among the first, countries in the African continent to have brought light to all of its people. Climate change is one of the major challenges of our age. We all need to tackle this challenge. It is important and indeed urgent to work together and rally to protect our planet. From this high rostrum, I wish to sound the alarm. Commitments were made during COP21 and were reaffirmed during COP26. These commitments related to the creation of the Green Climate Fund. It was decided that this fund would be funded to the tune of $100 billion a year. Madagascar was the fifth African country to complete its national adaptation plan. As such, my country should have been among the beneficiaries of this green fund. However, access to this financing is painfully slow, and as things stand, no commitment made has been upheld. It is unfair that the least polluting nations pay the highest price for the impact of climate change. Madagascar is an island nation, and as such vulnerable to the whims of the climate. In 2022 alone, this year alone, that is, 5 cyclones struck Grande Île in only 2 months. 178,000 hectares of arable land were flooded and destroyed. Our island is the first country to have endured a climate-induced famine. Water resources are drying up in the south of the country, and the people of this region are increasingly vulnerable. The consequences of climate change are worsening, and the global situation calls us to action. How many high-level meetings, summits, and international conferences have we already had? How many statements have we made? How many commitments have we made? Let us now turn these words into actions. Today, I bring to you the cries and the voices of the African continent in general and of Madagascar in particular. Africa's young people, the entire continent, is waiting for polluting countries to comply with agreements made. Keeping these promises is protecting our planet. Our populations demand that this be done, and future generations will hold us accountable. Further down the line, environmental protection issues are particularly dear to my heart. We're all aware that forests are the lungs of the earth, and however, the use of charcoal and firewood remains standard practice across the African continent. And indeed, 92% of my country's population uses these types of fuel. A family using charcoal or firewood for cooking destroys around 1 hectare of forest a year. That's a devastating figure. We must change the practice and the mindset. Consequently, my country will equip 250,000 families with bioethanol stoves in order to preserve 250,000 hectares of our forest every year. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, we've embarked upon major public works projects to transform the country because everything needs to be built and rebuilt. Everything is urgent. Everything is a matter of priority. For the last 4 years almost, we have tirelessly built and rebuilt roads, built schools, health centres, hospitals, dams, courts. We've built prisons in line with international standards. We've built sporting facilities, cultural facilities, and more besides. Madagascar is continually evolving in spite of the crisis which lashes in quick succession globally. My country is so huge that a lot of work has been done to ensure that it can all be connected by transport. However, the road remains long and thorny. We have faith, however, and we continue to move forward with determination. Incidentally, the plan Emergence Madagascar paves the way for the future. From north to south, from east to west, all of Madagascar is being built and rebuilt. Only last week, we opened the National Road 5A in the north of the country. Up till that point, and indeed for decades, had been a dirt road that took a week to travel in the rainy season. As things stand, 2 hours suffice for that journey, and that has meant that immediately the costs and prices of transport and the movement of people and goods have reduced, and that has meant that we've quantitatively improved the lives of local people and encouraged the socio-economic development of many regions of the country. In the south, we're beginning work on National Road 13, and soon work on National Road 10 will begin, as well as National Road 44 in the east. That work on Road 44 is continuing, and that has connected the nation's main granary to transport links. In the northwest, National Road 31 will be entirely restored, and that will mean that we can properly access our second largest granary. The first major motorway in the country will link the capital to our major port, and the work on that will begin in a few weeks. Currently, that journey requires 10 hours, but once the work has finished, that journey will only take 2 hours. The demographic dividend is today a variable which must be factored into our equations. We need to change the structure of our population. Current demographic growth is not proportionate to economic growth. In a number of regions, young girls of under 18 years old are already mothers of entire families and find themselves with, on average, 5 to 8 children for which they are responsible. Consequently, they find it more difficult to feed these children, raise these children, care for them, and educate them properly. The family planning program, which has already been launched, is consequently a crucial part of our strategy to control our birth rate and transform the current population from a dependent one into an active and economically productive one. Demography will become an asset for Madagascar and no longer a hindrance to development. In terms of education, we've taken huge strides forward. My government has built more than 1,000 classrooms and has invested a great deal in teaching tools and material. We've established school canteens, we've published books and textbooks, distributed digital tablets in order to considerably improve the quality of education our children and young people receive. The access rate to basic education has increased by 146%, and the school dropout rate has significantly decreased. We have made education a national priority. And here we renew our commitment to transform school and university life and lend new momentum to both. Last year, I had the opportunity to speak of my country's wish to finally see the implementation of resolutions made by the General Assembly of the United Nations in 1979 and 1980. These pertain to the return of the scattered islands and Nosy Islands in the Indian Ocean to Madagascar. We are delighted that very soon we'll have the second meeting of the Joint French-Malagasy Commission on the subject. And based on these resolutions, we hope that we'll have the support of the United Nations to finally have a fair, peaceful solutions. These resolutions indeed confirm the legitimacy of our claims. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, during the pandemic, sick people needed oxygen to survive. Currently, many countries are suffocated by the consequences of successive crises. These countries need support, help, and assistance, which will act as oxygen so that they can breathe and face the challenges of socioeconomic recovery, as well as achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We need to step up the pace of the implementation of new financing mechanisms, such as the Trust Fund for Resilience and Sustainability, and we need to ensure that funds can be disbursed from it. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and other friendly countries of Madagascar that have always stood shoulder to shoulder with us in the most difficult times. Counterparts, my brotherly African leaders, the Africa of tomorrow must be autonomous, independent, and prosperous. We have a duty to change the history of the continent and to write a new chapter so that each of us and each of our countries can change. Needs to strengthen its solidarity to provide common solutions to our common problems. May God bless each of our nations. The homeland is sacred. Thank you for your attention.